Hunt for Honor's Strength. A Star Trek, Enterprise-era fan fiction. Inspired by The Hunt for Red October. By The Real Socrates. Chapter 1. Shadows at the Border. The stars at the edge of the Federation were a thin scattering of pale lights, crushed under the weight of distance and the pull of a seam in space the charts labeled as a rift, as if the word were explanation enough. Inside that seam, light did not travel clean. It warped and blurred, braided with static that crawled across sensor boards and ate telemetry whole. The rift was an ugly place to be a hunter, and Captain Malcolm Reed had chosen it on purpose. He stood at the center of the U.S.S. Pioneer's bridge, not seated, not at parade rest, simply still, as though stillness itself might help the ship slide through the dark without drawing breath. The Neptune-class refit wore its upgrades like scars. Fresh plating along the forward quarter, leaner nacelles with a faint cerulean glow, a sensor suite tuned for the kind of work that demanded patience and good nerves. Reed had asked for subtlety. Starfleet had given him a scalpel. "Helm, reduce illumination to patrol minimum," Reed said, eyes on the forward viewer. "And from this point, no active scans unless I order it." "Aye, sir," Mayweather answered from the helm. Older now than when Reed had first known him aboard Enterprise, the curiosity still there but weighted by the gravity that comes after too many border watches. He dialed the deck lights down until the bridge was lit by a cool wash from the consoles, faces picked out in blue and green. At the aft rail, Charles "Trip" Tucker leaned one shoulder against a support strut and watched the science plots roll by. He wore neither the blue of engineering nor full-dress grays. A simple field jacket hung open at the throat, and yet nothing about him said casual. The set to his jaw, the restless energy in his hands, none of that had changed when he'd slipped into intelligence's shadowed corridors. If anything, it had sharpened. "Whatever's out there knows it's being watched," Tucker murmured, half to Reed, half to himself. "Power signatures that come and go like somebody tapping a mirror." Ensign Mira Patel, eyes wide at the science station, swallowed. "Sir, new blip bearing 127 Mark IV. It's faint, not a warp echo. It's gone," Tucker finished for her, studying the dying trace like a man reading a far shoreline through fog. "And it'll be back. Same bearing, near enough." Reed's hands laced behind him. He didn't sigh. He didn't need to. The bridge felt his patience as if it were gravity. "Log every flicker. Mr. Mayweather, adjust course to maintain parallel track at 1.2 light hours." The Pioneer turned a Predator's fraction. Engines kept their hum, steady and low, and the starfield on the viewer bent like light through water. Somewhere ahead, something peaked and ducked and peaked again, bait for an impatient captain. Reed was not an impatient captain. They didn't speak much, not aloud. The kind of watch that mattered wasn't sped up by conversation. Crew settled deeper into the rhythm of quiet tasks. Thorne at tactical, fingers ghosting along targeting controls he prayed not to use. Zhao at ops building a dataset of the rift's ambient hiss so the ghost might stand out from the noise the way a whisper does once you've learned the room's silence. Reed broke off to his ready room after an hour, nodding once to Mayweather. The door side shut behind him, and the hush deepened again into something like relief. Tucker came in without asking. Reed had waved him in on reflex, and took the chair opposite the small tea service Reed kept against one bulkhead. That, at least, had not changed since Enterprise. A square pot, 2 thick cups instead of delicate china, and a habit of pouring even in crisis that looked like ritual and felt like sanity. "It's not Suliban," Tucker said, resting forearms on knees. "Before that question hits the air. And it's not Romulan. The phase wobble on the carrier wave's wrong. Cloaks don't announce themselves by stuttering." "You're saying ECM," Reed replied, blowing across the surface of his tea to cool it. He didn't ask as a challenge. He asked because naming a thing correctly had power. "Best I've ever seen without goin' to magic," Tucker said. "They're painting over their engine signature with a brush that thinks 10 strokes ahead. It takes power, a lot of it. You can run that kind of mask for a while, but the harmonics'll build. Sooner or later, you vent heat or you fry something you'd rather not." Reed's mouth tugged toward a humorless smile. "And if they're venting, we'll smell it in the telemetry." He set the cup down, porcelain quiet on steel. "Myra's right to be nervous. If this is a test, it's a patient one. If it's a lure, it's set for a captain who doesn't like to be made a fool of." Tucker nodded. Lucky for us, that's not your vice. The door chime sounded, and Reed called, "Enter," without looking up. Mayweather stepped in, PDD tucked under his arm, expression as open as it ever was when the weight fell on him. "Vega 9 on a tight burst, sir. Commander de Leon. She says she's got your filters and then some." Reed gestured. "On speaker." The wall monitor blinked to life, and Sophia de Leon's sharp features resolved from compression artifacts. Hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, the look of someone who had surrendered sleep to curiosity and did not regret the bargain. "Captain, your anomaly isn't the rift's background noise. I ran it against 6 months of field data and 3 corrupted test suites nobody else wanted to touch. It's synthetic. And it's good." "How good?" Reed asked. "Good enough to make my boards lie to me while telling the truth," de Leon said with a flint of admiration in her tone. "You're being looked at through a veil that changes to fit the angle of your gaze. But there's a trick in it. The step function on their power curve isn't quite invisible. Every time the mask recalibrates to your heading, it leaves a hangnail. Tiny. But it's there." Tucker's grin flashed, quick and satisfied. "Breadcrumbs." De Leon shrugged. "Or fingerprints. Either way, if you keep your scans passive and your profile low, you'll keep catching the hangnails when they adjust to you. But if you go active, they'll know exactly how to adjust next time." "No active scans," Reed repeated softly. "Thank you, Commander. Keep a line open. If the pattern changes, I want to know before my helmsman feels it in his teeth." De Leon's smile was brief. "Understood." Vega 9 out. The screen died. Reed set his tea aside. "We have our brushstrokes. Now we see what picture they're trying to paint." Mayweather nodded toward the viewer's direction, as if the other ship could feel the gesture. "What kind of captain hides from his own?" he asked, the question gentle, not rhetorical. "The kind with something to lose," Reed said. Then, after a beat, because he knew Travis and because he trusted him, "Or the kind with something to give." Tucker said nothing at that. The silence between all 3 of them said enough. Deck by deck, the Pioneers shifted into a posture the crew felt before they had the words for it. Engineers trimmed warp coils until the field sang a thinner note that bled less into the rift. Environmental shaved a fraction from life support draw to keep the ship's radiative profile flat. Security ran quiet drills and stowed their rifles under seals they hoped to break only to clean. In sickbay, Dr. Bose rechecked his emergency trauma kits and did not look at the wall chrono. He'd learned early that time moved differently when the ship was holding its breath. On the bridge again, Reed watched the anomaly reappear and fade, each flicker logged, each angle recorded. The pattern was there, the hangnails as de Leon had called them, like small imperfections under a perfect varnish. Patel's confidence grew with each catch. She stopped flinching every time the trace went dead and started anticipating where it might bloom next. "Bearing 127 to 128, she said, voice steadier. "The vector correction is consistent with someone trying not to let us line up any one sweep too long," Tucker finished, not unkindly. "You're reading it right, Ensign. Keep it up." Thorne glanced over his shoulder toward Reed. "Sir, we're still outside anyone's weapons envelope by a comfortable margin. But if they decide to turn on us, it won't take long to erase that comfort." Reed's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Then we will not be the ones to blink. Helm, maintain distance. Match their speed. And if they run, follow the warmth, not the light." Mayweather smiled faintly at that, the kind of smile you keep to yourself on watch. "Aye, sir." Following the warmth. The rift flexed, an optical thing, not physical, and for a heartbeat the stars beyond looked like coins underwater. The Pioneer eased into the arc the Ghost had taken, not because Reed believed in omens, but because you learn the habits of another captain the way a tracker learned the gait of a wounded animal. There are ways even the best of us can't help moving, constraints that shape us without consent. Whoever was ahead knew how to hide. Whoever was ahead didn't want to be found by the wrong eyes. That told Reed more than any tactical briefing could have. At 0300 ship's time, the anomaly vanished for longer than it should have. 5 minutes. 10. Tucker's shoulders tightened by degrees, notched moments into muscle. Patel recalibrated her passive suite twice, then a third time when the second made things worse. De Leon's last packet sat unopened in Reed's queue because there was nothing in it that would make the Ghost come back, and he would not be caught looking backward when forward demanded all his attention. Then, "Contact," Patel breathed, too softly, as if afraid to scare it off. "Same bearing, slightly lower energy bleed." Captain, it's closer." "How close?" Reed asked. "Inside 1 light hour." Mayweather shot him a glance. A question, a warning, an affirmation. Reed answered with the smallest of nods. "Helm, keep our relative position constant. Thorn, bring shields to standby only. I don't want a bubble for them to smell unless we need it." Tucker exhaled. "He's lettin' us in. Or backing into us," Reed said. "Either way," Mayweather added, "we're in the right place to learn why." They rode the new line for 12 long minutes. The bridge crew fell into that deep quiet in which the only sound is the ship's body settling as it flexes and breathes. Even the rift seemed to soften its hiss. When the blip faded again, it did not wink out, it thinned. A feathered edge, not a blade. Patel adjusted the filter and caught what lay underneath. A faint, natural warp signature slipping out from behind the artificial veil, the way a hunter's breath becomes visible when the wind shifts. "There," Tucker said, satisfaction a low chord in his voice. "We've got you." Reed did not smile. He felt the satisfaction too, but he did not trust it. He let it pass through him and away. "Maintain course," he said. "And someone tell Dr. Bose to try to sleep." He stood a while longer after that, and when he did finally sit, it was not because fatigue demanded it. It was because the discipline of sitting when standing would change nothing was a discipline he valued. The hunt had begun in earnest. Somewhere ahead, a captain had a reason to hide from his own. The pioneer would learn that reason, or be ready to live with the consequences of failing to. Chapter 2: The Sensor Ghost. By morning watch, the pioneer had mapped the ghost's habits well enough that Reed could have drawn them from memory. A flicker on 127, a drift to 128, a pause as if to listen, then the correction back. The pattern was tighter now, as though the other captain had set aside improvisation in favor of ritual. Rituals were good. You could time them. In the wardroom, Mayweather spread navigational overlays across the table. "We're here," he said, tapping a sliver of space between two pale hazard ellipses, "and he keeps angling toward this corridor." He traced a path with his fingertip through a field of light haze. Less interference. Not clean, but survivable. Tucker took a swallow of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago and didn't seem to notice. "If I wanted to scrape a tail without lettin' 'em close enough to taste my heat," he said, "I'd do exactly that. Keep 'em on a short leash, bleed their curiosity, then slide where the rift's noise gives me the best odds." Reed studied the overlays, the weight of choice visible only in the set of his mouth. "This corridor, does it bring him closer to the border or deeper in?" "Neither cleanly," Mayweather said. "It skirts both. The longer line takes him toward the spiral shoals, the shorter bends back toward a mining dead zone we haven't used in years." Reed lifted his gaze. "A place where no one listens if you whisper." "Or where someone listens very carefully," Tucker said. "Depends on who got there first." They didn't decide then. Reed didn't decide on maybes. But when he stood, the picture had settled in him. He could feel a hand on the table even after it had lifted, the way a man's choices linger in a room after he's gone. The bridge was a different animal in daylight. Not brighter, the lights remained low, the consoles cool, but the human rhythm had shifted. New watch, new eyes, old tension stretched fresh across new backs. Ensign Patel yielded science to Lieutenant J.G. Harker, who preferred his plots in a different configuration. Less art, more rows and columns. Thorne sipped something that smelled like bitter almonds and looked like jet fuel. Dr. Bose sent up a note that read simply, "I will sleep when the ship does." Zhao's console chimed, a soft triple beat that meant Veganine was nudging the door. Reed took it on his armrest rather than on the main screen. De Leon's face appeared in a small window, expression held still around fatigue the way good officers wear dress uniforms that don't quite fit. "I've been watching your hangnails," she said without preamble. "They're getting cleaner." "Cleaner?" Reed asked. "Better hidden," she clarified. "Whoever's running that ECM is learning you. Your headings, your throttle adjustments, the width of your passive sweeps. They're still leaving trace when they pivot, but the trace is thinner. Whoever's behind that console is good, Captain. Very good. Tucker leaned in. So either they're testin' our limits, or they're gettin' scared. DeLeon cocked her head. Or both. Fear makes good people careful. Reed asked, any signature we can hang a name on? No, DeLeon said. They're too disciplined for that. But there's a fingerprint in the math. The noise they add isn't random, it hums. There's a rhythm to it. Engineers can't help themselves. We all have our favorite chords. Reed almost smiled. Find me the song, Commander. She nodded once. I'm trying. The channel cut, sparing her the indignity of being watched while she failed in real time. Reed set the armrest display aside. Harker called from science. Captain, faint wake at 128. Natural. ECM is slipping. Not slipping, Tucker said. Breathing. Then to Reed. He's got to vent heat, Malcolm. If he does it gentle, he won't light himself up like a candle. Maintain distance, Reed ordered. And give him his breath. It went that way for another 2 hours, a dance of angles, ghost breath, and restraint. The crew adapted. Where at first the silence had been taught as a wire, now it was a practice thing. A quiet learned the way a swordsman learns the feel of air along the blade. Reed saw the change and let it happen. You couldn't force a crew into the kind of patience this kind of work demanded. You made space for it, and you didn't break it with nerves. Mayweather's voice came low. Captain, if this is what Trip thinks it is, if he's running from Klingon, what's his endgame? He doesn't just run to run. No, Reed said. He runs to arrive. At what? Something that keeps him alive at least as long as it keeps him useful, Reed answered. Failing that, a place to die that makes a point. Tucker watched the blip throb and thin and throb again. You ever notice how some captains write letters to men they haven't met? He asked. You keep your ship on a certain line, you light your engines at a certain throttle, you hold your temper when someone takes a bite out of your hull. You're writin' a letter whether you mean to or not. Somebody out there is writin' one now. Reed raised an eyebrow. And what does it say? Tucker's mouth twisted. It says, don't shoot me in the back. I got something you want. Or something he wants us to think we want, Thorne muttered, not quite under his breath. Duly noted, Reed said. He did not dismiss the caution. He folded it into the shape of the day and kept moving. The hook came at end of watch. Patel had returned to science. DeLeon had sent nothing new. The rift's hiss had grown almost soothing, a lie the body told itself to avoid wearing out. Then Harker, who had stayed at the console a quarter hour past his relief because he had a superstition about leaving a trail mid-curve, saw it. Captain. Bearing change, he said, voice very flat. Good officers sounded flat when excited. Not a correction. A decision. On the plots, the ghost stopped playing at appearing and vanishing along its usual band and dropped, cleanly, decisively, into the corridor Mayweather had traced on the wardroom table. The one between the shoals and the dead mining grid. It moved like a blade sliding into a sheath. Reed didn't need to say anything. Mayweather was already adjusting heading. Thorne was already lifting shields to 1/4 standby. Tucker was already watching the ECM hum change key. Sir, Patel said, this path, this takes us toward the old mining station. Yes, Reed said, finally sitting. Yes, it does. He let his palm rest on the armrest long enough to feel the hum under the skin. And we will follow. He did not say aloud what the three of them already knew, that the difference between a trap and an invitation is often only who steps first, and whether the step is taken with a blade in the open or under the cloak of a gambler's smile. Reed had no cloak. He had measured steps and a crew who trusted him to take them. Chapter 3. Into the Rift. The I.K.S. Honor's strength slipped along the seam of broken light as if the stars themselves had learned to hold their breath. The rift made a sound through the hull, nothing a human ear could hear unaided, but a Klingon could feel it in his teeth, a low iron rasp like a blade being drawn across stone. Captain Marok Ram'yIS sat forward on the command dais, hands loose on the grips, the weight of armor on his shoulders a familiar gravity. On the main screen, the void was a bruised violet, with threads of green that pulsed when the rift's gravimetric currents twisted. To the left of the screen, Tan's engineering repeater scrolled a rain of characters. Harmonic windows, phase offsets, heat reallocation matrices, the living script of a machine pretending not to exist. "We are seen and not seen," Tan reported, his voice calm, clipped. "Sensors ahead will look and find only the rift. Sensors behind will look and find only themselves." Marok glanced down at the time index burned into the corner of the screen. It had been 29 hours since they crossed the line where patrols became pursuers. The pursuit had not shown itself yet, but pursuit had a smell, and he had learned it young. Kover stalked the lower tier, broad and implacable, the metal of his gauntlets clicking against the rail with each turn. "If the High Council has noticed your absence, Captain," he said without looking up, "they will not send questioners. They will send a knife and call it honor." "They will send 2 knives," Marok said. "One to the throat, one to the back." The memory came without asking. A feast hall under the Chancellor's banners, braziers throwing red light onto the long tables, voices high with wine and victory. She had been there, his life mate, her hair braided in the old way, eyes bright with mirth at a joke he had not heard because he had been leaning across to speak to the Chancellor's envoy. The envoy's smile had been oiled leather, the flash of rings on his fingers had caught the firelight. The hall had gone quiet all at once, no signal, no command, just the way silence falls when a single sound pierces it. She coughed. Not the rough bark of dust in the throat, but a stuttering choke that bent her over her cup. There had been a moment's laughter, then a confusion of voices, then the flat sound a body makes when it strikes the floor. The gag writhed on the stone beside her like a mockery. Dishonor is not in death, he had been raised to believe. Dishonor is in meaninglessness. He had fought in the Kethalolans and watched good warriors fall with their teeth bared, and he had sung for them. He had no song for this. The healers said, "Bad fortune." The envoys said, "Tragedy." The Chancellor's first private words to him had been, "You will not speak of this again." On the bridge, Lieutenant Vecra's impatience finally found its voice. "Captain," she said, "the ECM drive hides us from fools and cowards. It does nothing to sharpen our blades. If there is a Federation ship in our wake, let it find us teeth first." Kover's hand moved faster than the eye liked to admit. The crack of metal on armor echoed up to the domed ceiling. Vecra rocked back a step, more insulted than injured. "You will not name our prey before the captain weighs its worth," Kover said. Torvek laughed under his breath, a sound with too much heat to be safe. "What worth is a prey we will not eat?" He didn't face Kover when he said it. He faced Marok, daring him to call the remark insolent. Marok did not rise. "A wolf that sinks its teeth into a porcupine wins the meal and spends a week spitting quills," he said. "I will not have quills in my mouth while Korath comes for my throat." The name settled them. Even Vecra's jaw unclenched. Korath was not a rumor on winds. Korath was a boundary drawn in blood, an older D6 made dangerous by a captain who wasted nothing and no one. If Korath had been sent, it would not be to talk. It would be to remove the stain of Marok's absence before it dripped in view of anyone the Chancellor could not control. Tan looked up from his array. "Captain, the field is warming faster than projected. The rift's eddies are harmonizing with our mask. Elegant, but it will cook us if we let it. How long?" 3 cycles before I must vent or burn a hole through the deck." "Vent," Marok said. "In the lee of a sheer. Make it look like the rift cleaning its teeth." Klingon bridges are not quiet places, but a quality of quiet took the room then, the kind that isn't a lack of sound but an agreement between warriors that what comes next matters. On the lower tier, Morvatha's fingers moved over the calm grid with the fluency of prayer. On tactical, Vecra's hatred of stealth found compromise in hunting the perfect moment to shatter it. At helm, Torvek fed small yaw corrections into the Raptor's bones until the ship felt like a spear tip finding seams in armor. Tan cut the ECM output by a breath, and heat spilled invisibly into the rift. The hum underfoot shifted a half-tone. Marok felt it in his ribs, a reminder that all machines have appetites even when you ask them to act like ghosts. He let his eyes drift from the screen to the faces of his crew. He had chosen each not because he trusted them. Trust is for children and poets, but because he knew how each would break when the iron entered them. Kover would break outward, becoming harder the way metal does under a hammer. Vecra would break forward, the animal in her delighted to finally have permission. Torvek would break loud, and then, if a hand caught his shoulder at the right angle, he would break true. "The Federation ship is still with us," Tan said quietly, as if naming a weather. "It moves when we move." Marok's mouth remembered how to smile. "Good," he said. "Let them learn our scent. When the knife comes for our spine, I will have a hand around its wrist." Chapter 4. The Edge of Shadows. The U.S.S. Pioneer eased into the new corridor as if the ship herself had decided to be cautious. On the main viewer, the rift shed some of its uglier colors. The distortions were still there, patches of warping that bent starlight into slicks, but the path ahead looked less like broken glass and more like river water. It was the kind of place a captain chose when he wanted to be found by exactly one set of eyes. "Hold us at the corridor's centerline," Reed said. "Any closer to the walls and we'll be visible where it counts most." Mayweather's fingers were steady on the controls. "I can feel the shear on the port side. Like a crosswind." "Compensate without leaving a wake," Reed said. He didn't need to tell Travis how. The reminder wasn't for the helmsman, it was for the room. At Ops, Zhao dimmed the ambient until only the console's glow remained. Thorne set shields to standby and then took his hands away from the panel, as if touching it would confess a willingness to use it. Tucker prowled the aft rail, eyes half on the science plots and half on the captain. "ECM breathing again," Tucker said. "Not sloppy. Intentional. He's bleeding heat where the rift hisses loudest." Reed allowed himself the quietest answer. "A considerate fugitive." The ready room felt like a chapel when Tucker and Mayweather stepped inside. Reed did not sit. He stood with his palms on the table, the star charts asleep beneath the glass. "We are being led," he said without preamble. "Not dragged, not pushed. Led." Mayweather didn't pretend to be surprised. "He wants a witness." "No," Tucker countered. "He wants a judge. Reed's the one he picked." Reed looked up at that, one brow tilting by the smallest degree. "Because I am a warrior in a fleet of explorers?" Tucker met his eye without flinching. "Because you won't waste words when the time comes to decide. Klingon respect that." "Respect," Reed repeated, tasting the shape of the word in his mouth. "If he is playing at respect, he means to spend it." "On what?" "On not dyin' for nothin'," Tucker said. "On making the council bleed when they try to make an example out of him." Mayweather's voice softened. "On honoring someone the council treated like an inconvenience." Reed's gaze flicked, briefly, sharply. He was not a man to be moved by sentiment argued as policy, but he was not blind to the shape grief carved in other men. "We approach," he said. "We do not announce." The corridor opened into a basin of clearer space, an eddy in the rift where an old mining station hung motionless, lights dead, hull pitted by time and neglect. Its spine stuck out at odd angles like a carcass in a desert, the metal bleached by radiation and the touch of micrometeors. It was the kind of place you chose when you wanted no one to admit they had been there. Patel's voice was a whisper, though the channel was clear. "No power signatures. No life signs. Just the shell." "Keep it that way," Reed said. "We circle wide." On the second pass, the sensor ghost blinked where the station's shadow fell across the rift's background glow. Tucker caught the signature first. Mayweather had already begun the slow, lazy banking turn that would put the Pioneer's ventral side toward the station without ever quite admitting interest. Reed stood behind the helm. "If there's a meeting to be had, it will not be on our terms." "Never is with Klingon," Tucker muttered. Then, softer, "But sometimes it ends on M." They did not meet then. The Honor's strength ghosted the far side of the dead station and slid away as if to say, "Not yet." The message, if it was a message, was understood. Reed did not chase. He let the distance breathe until the sensor trace stretched thin and then vanished into the rift's static again. On the bridge, the crew exhaled as one organism. The spell of imminence broke without collapsing. It became a hum in the ship's bones instead of a drumbeat in the ears. Mayweather glanced up at Reed. "You think he saw us see him?" Reed's answer was quiet. "He arranged for it." Tucker's grin flashed and was gone. Then next time he'll show you where to stand. Or where not to, Reed said. He looked at the dead station on the viewer, its black angles like a letter in a language he had yet to fully learn. Then he turned away. Back to the corridor. Keep our light low. And no active scans unless I order it. The ship turned, the rift swallowed their outline, and the hunt walked on, less a chase now than a conversation neither side was willing to speak aloud. Chapter 5. Blood in the Rift. The rift's light did not fall so much as smear across the Honor's Strength's forward plates, a bruised sheen that made the Raptor's hull look as if it had been forged from night. Marok watched the old D6, Karatha's ship, emerge from the haze with the implacable confidence of a butcher who has never once had a carcass slide from his hook. "Disruptors charging," Vecra said, the hunger in her voice turned into competence by force of will. "Forward batteries green." Tan didn't look up from the ECM lattice. "You will not have a clean target picture, Captain. The rift currents are favoring us. If we stoke them hard, their targeting will see 3 ships where one stands." Marok's gaze never left the screen. "We do not kill today," he said, the words like iron filings across a lodestone. "We cut their stride and step aside." Torvek's hands clenched and opened on the helm grips. "To spare the hunter is to invite the hunt. To spare him is to choose the field," Marok said. "On my mark." The first slash of emerald from the D6 tore a glowing scar in the darkness and went long, scattering against the rift's denser pocket where Tan had already started the ECM weave. The Honor's Strength rolled into the gap, her own disruptors silent until the moment felt like a blade sliding under a rib. "Now," Marok said. Vecra's volley struck the D6 not on its heart but on its stride, the starboard impulse manifold. Green light bit, metal screamed, and the big ship stumbled in space. She did not bleed, but she faltered, and in that hitch an older captain might have seen his death. Karath only corrected, feeding power to auxiliary, pushing into the rift like a boar forced to turn on one broken leg. "Cease fire," Marok ordered. "Hold the mask at full." Tannis' fingers danced, the lattice humming into a higher key that made the deck under their boots feel about to sing. "Core temperature rising. We are writing checks the coils will refuse to cache in 5 minutes." "3 will do," Marok said. On the lower tier, Morveth flinched, then bent closer to his panel as if listening with his bones. He spoke without looking up. "Captain. Narrow beam. Federation encryption. Enters on a bearing that is insolent." Cover's head snapped toward him. "Content." Morveth shook his head once. "Captain's eyes only." The bridge stilled. Even Vecra's breath caught. Marok descended from the dais with the deliberateness of a man drawing breath before a plunge, came to Cover's console, and keyed the message open. It was not a face. It was not a voice. It was a line of coordinates with a time window slim enough to be a dare. Cover's tone was low. "A trap." "An answer," Marok said. The corner of his mouth almost remembered how to smile. "From the only human who would speak to me this way." He closed the channel, erasing even the residue of it, and looked up toward helm. "Torvek, bring us about 2 points. We will give both Karath and the shadow behind him a wide berth." Torvek hesitated, only a heartbeat, but in that heartbeat lived a lifetime of arguments between his blood and his captain's will. Then he set the new heading, the Raptor's nose dipping into thicker haze where even the rift's distortion seemed to distrust itself. Vecra hissed disappointment, but Cover's glance cut the sound off like a knife. "Do not waste your teeth on the wrong throat," he said. "There will be time to chew." On the dying D6, ancillary lights strobed, then steadied. Karatha's crew threw power and profanity in equal measure at their wounded manifold and held the old beast online. On Pioneer's plots, far off, ghosting, 2 Klingon signatures tangled like wrestlers in fog, and then the smaller one slipped free, vanishing into the rift's smear. The larger steadied, breathing hard. In the Pioneer's ready room, Reed watched the last clean image resolve and fade on a repeater. Tripp stood with his palms pressed flat on the table's edge, shoulders bunched. Mayweather hovered, reading the map the way a navigator does when he knows the ocean will not permit a second chance. "He didn't finish the job," Tucker said. "He learned what he wanted," Reed answered. "So did we." Mayweather tapped a knuckle softly against the glass over the star chart. He let Koroth live to send a message. Or because killing him makes a noise we can't survive, Reed said, then looked at Tucker. He sent something. Tucker's mouth tilted. Encrypted, narrow beam, captain's eyes only? I bet my next shore leave on it. You haven't had shore leave in years, Mayweather said. All the more galling if I'm wrong. Reed didn't smile. We won't be. He lifted his eyes from the chart. We follow, still passive. We make the rendezvous if he means us to. But until then, he tapped 2 fingers twice against the tabletop, the signal he'd used on Enterprise when the only order worth giving was restraint. No active scans unless I order it. The Raptor slid deeper into the chosen fold of space, her ECM weaving now like a chant. Tan vented heat in the lee of a sheer, and for 5 breaths the ship felt like a living thing exhaling. Torvek's jaw set as he threaded through a density gradient that would have snapped a less attentive helm, and Vecra stalked her readings like a tigress who had been told she must wait at the edge of the field until the prey put its head down. Marok did not sit again. He stood with one hand on the forward rail and watched the rift give way to the kind of darkness that promised an answer to a personal question. Some men chased policy. He pursued judgment. If Malcolm Reed had the spine Marok believed he did, then the human would come to the place written in the numbers and stand where a warrior ought to stand, within reach, without theatrics, blade unshone but felt. Hold to the course, he said quietly, and for once even Torvek did not find a fight in the words. Chapter 6. Whispers and Shadows. The Pioneer's bridge felt electrically quiet, the silence of machines on the edge of tolerances and people on the edge of decision. The rift's narrows had not yet taken them, but the corridor was tightening, and every fractional course change sounded louder than it should have in Reed's bones. Mr. Thorne, Reed said, not turning, confirm we are at sensor minimums. Any lower and we navigate by prayer. Thorne's answer came clipped. At minimum, Captain. We scan passively on the narrowest possible band. Shields at sniff only. At science, Patel's shoulders lifted and fell as if the act of breathing required approval. The ghost is present, sir. It's a watermark now, not a smear. We can follow, if they want us to. Trip leaned closer, bracing one hand on Patel's console. That right there is the tell. He's walking us in. Reed's hands rested behind his back, a habit that kept the bridge from seeing them curl into fists when his mind churned faster than he allowed his voice to move. Mr. Mayweather, course to keep us one corridor behind anything he takes. Plotted and held, sir, Mayweather said. No wake. Good. Reed let the hum of the deck speak a moment. Maintain a low profile, no active scans unless I order it. In the ready room, where the quiet was more honest because it did not have to convince anyone, Reed set 3 images on the table. The coordinates, the corridor overlay, and a training frame of a Raptor-class profile. Trip stood over one shoulder. Mayweather stood over the other. For a second Reed allowed himself to remember what it had meant to stand with Archer and Tipal over a different table, wondering if their caution would betray their courage. He wants contact, Mayweather said. He wants it somewhere no one can watch. Reed nodded once. He also wants to see if we're clever enough to arrive without telegraphing our approach. Trip's mouth tugged sideways. You're saying this is a test. I'm saying it's an invitation with teeth. Reed's gaze went to the Raptor silhouette. He incapacitated Koroth without gloating. He ran without preening. I trust restraint more than rhetoric. For now. Mayweather's eyes flicked. If this goes wrong, we walk, Reed said. We do not die for a man who hasn't told us the truth yet. But if he has it to give, if what DeLeon sees in the math is as good as she thinks, then letting his ship be erased without hearing him would be a failure I won't carry. Trip's voice dropped. You think he's a defector? I think he's a captain with a reason to risk being mistaken for one. Vega-IX's link cut through the rift's grumble on a pinhole bandwidth. DeLeon didn't bother with greetings. Your ghost is modulating at a constant pulse length between corrections. It wasn't before. Behavior change. Either fatigue or intention. Intention, Reed said. Then he's mocking you. He'll expect you to be where the mark predicts. Trip's smile was quick and tired. Breadcrumbs and a map. Or a trap, de Leon said. Captain, if you're going to do something brave, do it quiet. Always, Reed said, and killed the channel before she could see him almost smile. They shifted watches early to put familiar hands on every console they trusted for a meet that wasn't called a meet. Reed stayed on the bridge. He never left a room when the thing he had taught the room to do depended on his presence more than his words. Steady as she goes, he said, and it wasn't the kind of order that needed to be repeated. The ship slid forward into thicker night. Chasing a watermark, the crew had learned the shape of the way sailors learn a wind smell. The dead mining station waited somewhere ahead. He could feel the geometry of it, the way space bent around a mass that had forgotten it was supposed to be alive. Reed did not think of the council. He did not think of reports. He thought of men who had chosen to be captains for reasons that were not pensions. We go. We watch. We decide, he said, and the Pioneer answered under his feet. Chapter 7, The Gauntlet's Edge. 3 more Klingon signatures grazed the corridor's edges like wolves sniffing the fence line. On Pioneer's tactical repeater, they were thin, intermittent, D5 hulls most likely, moving fast on parallel tracks that converged toward the basin where the dead station hung. Thorne said what the whole bridge felt. They're late to a party they weren't invited to. Or the hosts, Trip murmured. Reed's chin dipped, a nod so small it could have been a tick. We keep our angle. If they cross behind us. We do not become the interesting thing in the room. Mayweather's hands never left the controls. They're giving the Narrows a wide berth. They'll try to pin on the far side of the basin. Let them, Reed said. If Marok wants us, he'll make certain their eyes look elsewhere. Aboard the Honor Strength, the crew had gone from impatience to the kind of focus you only see in a butcher the moment before the knife bites. Tanis Lattis sang softly, a hum you could feel along the base of the skull. Vekra's mouth had gone thin with the discipline of not shooting. Torvek's shoulders had gone broader with the effort of not turning the Raptor around and daring Koroth to make a lesson of him. Kover approached the dais, checked his pace, then stood one step down from Marok, where a first officer belongs when he is close enough to counsel and far enough to be cut off. They will bring more than Koroth next time. They already have, Marok said. And because they are many, they will be clumsy. Tanis' eyes flicked. Our window is short. The coils will not hold a high weave for long without leave to breathe. You will have your breath, Marok said. After the meeting. Not before. Torvek risked it. If there is a meeting. Marok's gaze slid to him and stopped. There is. The word had the weight of iron that remembers the hammer. Torvek bowed his head, chastened not by fear but by recognition. The dead station rolled into view, a black flower against false dawn. The Raptor ghosted under its shadow. The watermark of the Pioneer moved to a place that said, I see you, and I am not announcing it to anyone else. For 100 breaths the rift's hiss was the only sound both bridges trusted. Prepare Shuttle Bay 2, Marok said. No running lights. No recorded logs. Kover absorbed the order like a blow and then nodded once. Aye. He did not like the dishonor of erasing a record. He liked the dishonor of being seen by the wrong eyes less. Vekra, Marok added, if anything larger than a meteor blinks where it should not, you will open fire without awaiting my order. Choose your shots. Leave witnesses who can neither prove nor disprove what they saw. Vekra's grin showed a lot of teeth. At last. On Pioneer, Reed stood. Mr. Mayweather, you have the con. Mr. Thorne, no one so much as sneezes on a firing key. Mr. Zhao, you will log nothing until I say you will log something. Trip moved to intercept. You aren't goin' alone. Reed's look was the kind you give an old friend when you could argue, but you won't. You're more useful here if someone chooses to read our mail while I'm out. I want your hands on that board when de Leon burps in our ear. Trip started to say something flippant and then didn't. Aye, Captain. Reed's last look around the bridge was brief and unadorned. Keep our light low. Then he was in the lift, and the bridge exhaled only when the doors shut. Chapter 8. The Hour of Compromise. The shuttle's skin drank the rift's light the way a blade drinks oil, leaving no reflection. Reed flew with the small motions of a man who had practiced stillness more than bravado. The station's docking spines reached like fingers. He slipped between them and latched onto a collar whose locking petals remembered how to close. Air equalized. The hatch cycled. Reed stepped into a corridor that smelled like cold metal and stale ghosts. He did not draw a weapon. His hand knew where it was if he needed it. Footsteps answered his. Not many. The rhythm was not Federation. It was heavier, heel first, a warrior's cadence turned down to avoid echo. Marok came into view as if the station had decided to invent him out of shadow, armor worn like truth, eyes hard and not unkind, a face carved by wind and choice. "Captain Reed," Marok said. There was no surprise in it. "You stand where I thought you would." "And you are exactly as careful as I expected," Reed said. He did not offer his hand. Klingon didn't need it. "Good," Marok said. "Then we will not waste each other's time with ceremony." They spoke first of the station. A fiction, really, two men measuring whether the other understood the rules of a meeting without witnesses. Then they spoke of the rift. After that, they spoke of the thing between them without saying its name. "You could have killed Korath," Reed said. "You chose not to." "I chose a different kill," Marok said. "One with longer teeth." "The Council," Reed said. "The habit of pretending honor is a mask you wear to a feast," Marok answered. His jaw flexed once, a muscle clenching around an old wound. "They sent a political liaison to sit in my chair and whisper changes to orders already carried out. He died choking on gag. Unlucky, they said. Dishonorable, they meant, because death without meaning is a stain we do not know how to wash. They told me to be silent and accept the washing." Reed's eyes didn't leave his. "And you chose to soap the cloth with blood." Marok's mouth almost smiled. "You understand. What do you want?" Reed asked, "Because you cannot judge a thing without asking its shape to declare itself." "Sanctuary for my crew. Terms for myself that will permit me to remain a warrior in a place that calls itself a union of explorers. And a buyer for a weapon that is not a weapon." "The ECM," Reed said. "The truth that hides a ship without a cloak," Marok said. "You will call it defensive because that will make it easier to swallow. You will use it for more than defense because you are not fools." Reed didn't offer denials. "And your price?" "Witness," Marok said simply, "that your council hears what I say about the way honor rots when it is forced to sit at a table with men who think power is a kind of meat." Reed stood very still. "You're asking for politics." "I am asking for someone else to remember what the word warrior is supposed to mean," Marok said. "If you cannot do that, then take the engine and give my crew soft ground. I will find a different death." They did not shake hands. They did not swear. They agreed on a corridor and 2 more places to stand where no one could hear them say they had agreed. When Reed left, his footsteps sounded exactly like they had when he arrived. Behind him, Marok did not watch him go. Watching a man's back is disrespect in some languages. Outside, the rift brightened, a false dawn that meant another ship had come too near its walls with engines a little too hot. On Pioneer, Mayweather nudged the ship into a place that would let Thorne pretend he was not itching to put power on the shields, while Trip and DeLeon raced to close a door someone else had decided to open. In the Honor Strength's shuttle bay, Tan waited without fidgeting, which was how you knew he was afraid. Marok nodded once to him as he passed. "It can be done," he said. "It must be done quickly." Tan's relief didn't show on his face. It showed in the way his hands moved when he turned back to his array, sure now, as if the keys had remembered his fingers. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The rift did not roar so much as tremble with energy, a constant, low thunder conducted through hull and bone. On Pioneer's bridge, it was a second heartbeat. Reed watched the tactical repeater bleed with false ghosts and real predators while Mayweather held them above the center line of the corridor like a tightrope walker refusing the pole. Thorne's voice was measured. 2D5S, long arc, herding vectors. The damaged D6 has stabilized on auxiliary, Captain. She's not fast, but she's stubborn. Tucker moved to science, shoulders hunched, eyes moving with a predator's patience. Marok's letting him smell him. He wants them too close to spread wide. "And us?" Reed asked. Tucker's laugh was low and not amused. We're the scent he wants em to miss. Reed's hands folded behind his back. Maintain our offset. No active scans unless I order it. Aye, Mayweather said. Crosswind building on port. Compensating. Aboard the Honor Strength, the air was hot with recirculated breath and the ozone tang of energized coils. The ECM lattice purred, then shivered, then purred again as Tan rode it like a beast that wanted to throw him. D5S on converging vectors, Vecra said, pleasure wrapped in contempt. Two pups nipping while their wounded sire limps. Cover studied range and bearing and shook his head once. They are not pups. They are teeth set by a careful hand. Torvek's hands flexed on the helm grips. Let them bite, and we break their jaws. Marok did not look away from the forward display. We make them choose between losing a tooth and losing the prey before them. Tan cut power a fraction, and the deck seemed to sigh. Captain, the coils will not hold a high weave and heavy maneuver much longer. We must breathe. You will have breath, Marok said. On my word. Tan did not look relieved. He looked ready. The first pass was ugly by design. The foremost D5 threw a spread of disruptor bolts like a man tossing stones into river fog, hoping to strike the ferry by luck. Tan's mask split their targeting picture into a smear of hull echoes. The volleys burned green holes in nothing and gave the rift new afterimages to ingest. Faint to port, Marok said. Torvek snapped the Raptor along the indicated vector, then flattened her, then kicked her starboard. 3 moves in a breath, enough to drag the D5 into the sheer where maneuver dies. The second D5 overshot, forced to wheel wide to avoid his partner's exhaust. Now, Vecra asked, teeth bared. Wound, Marok said. The volley from Honor Strength was a scalpel, not an axe. 2 lances across the D5's ventral grid, a third on her dorsal RCS. The cruiser lurched, drifted, and bled heat. Torvek hissed satisfaction through his teeth. Cover's nod was almost a blessing. Hold, Marok said when Vecra's fingers twitched for a 4th shot. Witnesses, not corpses. On Pioneer, the board told a story in math and light. Tucker's voice came low. He's paintin' lesson plans on their shields. Reed allowed himself the smallest of acknowledgments. He's teaching someone how to fight him. Us? Mayweather asked. Reed kept his eyes on the screen. Or the Council. Zhao's console chimed. Distortion shift. The D6 is pushing auxiliary beyond safe. Captain, if they ram their nose through the corridor wall, we get a turbulence cascade. Reed considered it for a breath, then 2. They won't, he said. Korath didn't live this long by drowning himself. Then, quieter, not when he can drown others first. Captain, Thorne said, we could end this with a single spread. Reed did not answer Thorne directly. Maintain course, speed, and profile. Our job is not to be interesting. Copy, Mayweather said, and the deck thrummed in assent. Chapter 10. The Knife in the Dark. The distance between hunter and hunted narrowed to something personal. Pioneer shadowed the Raptor at 20,000 kilometers, too close for a patrol ship to mistake the pairing, too far for a single accidental yaw to turn into a collision at relativistic speeds. The rift's static washed quiet and steady over their hull. Tucker stared at a quivering line on Patel's display. That's not just ECM. He's leaving us a tempo. Mayweather adjusted by fractional degrees. He's marking beats on the bar line. We're supposed to play between them. Reed took the con with his eyes alone. Then stay on the offbeat. Patel swallowed. Sir, a personal note. Reed lifted a hand a centimeter. Permission. I know this isn't a cloak, but it feels like one. It feels like a man asking not to be shot in the back, Reed said. Keep your hands steady, Ensign. Yes, sir. On Honor Strength, Tannis' hands had stopped shaking. They had passed through terror into the cold clarity you get in the last 10 minutes of a desperate flight. He trimmed power until the mask's hum dropped to a low, constant thread and rebalanced the heat-sink bleed through a cluster of hull plates whose signatures already looked like damage. The trick of good lies was to make them indistinguishable from the truth unless you were standing with your hand on the bruise. Shadow's still with us, Morvath reported. Federation. Quiet. Cover's mouth made a shape that was not a smile. Reed is quiet. Marok felt the presence behind them like pressure changes in a tunnel. He let himself think the name he had not spoken aloud to his crew, Malcolm Reed. He tasted the syllables like iron and rain. A man who had made a virtue out of limits, who had learned to hurt with precision and live with what that skill bought him. A man who might understand why you broke your own sword rather than let it be used for a feast you could not stomach. "Let him stay," Marok said, so soft that only Kover heard it. "He sharpens the blade behind us." Kover grunted approval. "And the one ahead." Orders came in wrapped in velvet and wire. Pioneer's subspace transceiver chirped the one tone that meant Starfleet Command had found breath to spare. Zhao routed the packet to Reed's chair without being told. Reed read without changing his face. "Disengage," Mayweather guessed, not a question. Tucker's jaw tightened. "Command says step away and call for a task force. I'm gonna." Reed set the PDD down like he was returning a book to a shelf. "Command says we are to avoid undue entanglement with Klingon assets under pursuit by other Klingon assets." Thorne snorted so softly that only the 2 meters around him heard. "Elegant." Reed's voice remained flat. "We maintain discretion." He looked up at the Starscape and the watermark running through it. "And we use our judgment." Tucker's shoulders dropped. "That's you sayin', no." "That's me saying we finish the thing we set out to learn," Reed said. "Then we let Command argue about the report." On Honor's strength, a rare calm fell across the bridge. The hunt had boiled into a simmer, the kind that brings fat to the top and forces you to skim before the stew sours. Torvek's eyes were on the rift, not his own temper. Vekra's fingers rested on triggers she did not pull. Morveth tuned his ears to the subspace noise floor until he could hear his own pulse in it. Marok stood. "Tan. Captain. If we ask the ship to disappear while she runs, how long?" Tan did not lie. "A minute. Maybe 2. After that, coils melt and plates warp. We do not disappear gracefully, we tear." Marok nodded. "Then we will not disappear. We will convince the eyes that we are a rock." Tannis' answering flash of teeth was the closest he came to laughter. "A heavy one." Marok looked forward, his face hard with decision and something like respect. "Hold the line. The knife we need will come from the dark." Chapter 11. Shadows Converge. The Narrows did not open so much as narrow around them, a throat closing. Pioneer dropped to the slowest speed that felt like momentum. The hull creaked once, a sound that made new crew glance up and old crew ignore it. 3 minutes to the choke, Mayweather said. After that, a basin and a whole lot of room for mistakes. Reed kept his voice even. "Keep us centered." Patel's readings jittered, then steadied as she shaved her filter widths again. Honor's strength is breathing on a regular pulse. "I can ride it." "Do," Reed said. "Trip." "I'm here," Tucker said, without looking away from his screen. "And so is De Leon," on a very annoying whisper. "Put her on," Reed said. De Leon's voice arrived as if it had crawled through rock. "You're heading for a resonance node. If your friend is as good as I think, he'll use it to throw false echoes forward and to either side. Stay in the trough and you'll see his real wake." "Thank you," Reed said. "We'll try to avoid becoming modern art." On Honor's strength, Tannis' eyes had that inland storm look, lightning far away, pressure at the sinuses, animals restless. He tuned the ECM to the node so that when the lattice sang, the rift sang back, a call and response that laid a ghost corridor ahead of them like stepping stones. "Beautiful," Vekra said, grudging and reverent both. "Warriors appreciate good tools," Tan said, which was his way of accepting a compliment without smiling. Marok leaned on the rail, reading the shape of space with his body as much as with his eyes. "They will see many of us," he said. "They must not see the one that matters." "They will not," Tan said simply. Kover tilted his head, listening to an old memory of battlefields that had been things of mud and light, not math. "We are writing a poem across their sensors." "Then make sure the last line is a threat," Marok said. The D5S came back on the board like bad news you'd hoped you'd outlived. They had learned caution from their first pass. No more blind volleys, No more overeager corrections. They crept the edges of the Narrows instead, waiting for someone else to make a mistake. Karatha's nose is in the basin, Thorne reported. Auxiliaries still screaming. He's angry. Angry is predictable, Reed said. I prefer him that way. Mayweather's hand slowed, then slowed again. The ship's movement became a meditation. If he sees Marok, he'll charge. If he sees us first, he'll consider, Reed countered. Patel breathed in, out. There, she said, like a doctor hearing a faint heartbeat. Real wake, center trough. Follow it, Reed said. Gently. On the far side of the Narrows, space widened like a mouth. Honor's strength skimmed the edge of the basin and then began to sink into its shadow, a maneuver that would leave a different kind of trail, one that a patient ally might read and a hurried enemy might miss. Shadow with us, Morvath confirmed. Still quiet. Tanis' board ticked upward on heat. Captain. Marok nodded. Breathe. The ECM hum dropped a half-tone, heat poured invisibly into the rift, and for a moment they were just a ship again, a hard, fast, honest object in a hostile universe. Pioneer will see us, Kovar said. Yes, Marok said. Good. Vekra smiled like a woman promised a fight she believed she would enjoy. And Korath. Marok's eyes were on the dark ahead. He will see us last. Chapter 12. The Weight of Honor. They met without meeting, at a second dead place carved from old industry and older neglect. No witnesses, no record. Only two captains and the long echo of the first conversation that had made this one necessary. Reed arrived first and did not pace. Marok arrived a minute later and did not posture. This was not negotiation. It was the pressing of blades against palms to see whose blood welled first. You were right to leave Korath alive, Reed said, not as praise, not as condemnation. It keeps the board honest. It sets the time, Marok said. It says to every predator, I choose when the meat is worth the bite. Tan waited outside the chamber, hands folded in a way that looked like prayer and was not. Mayweather waited on the other side of a bulkhead with a patience that would have looked like stillness to someone who didn't know how many calculations a helmsman makes when he has nothing to steer. Inside, Reed said, my government will call this a theft if I let them. Give me a shape I can defend. Marok did not blink. Then tell them the truth. A weapon against fear is not a weapon against law. Your sensors will be stronger for knowing how to be blind. Your ships will survive longer for knowing how to be quiet. Reed did not point out that quiet ships make excellent knives. He suspected Marok knew it and approved. And your price remains the same. Sanctuary for my crew. Witness for my cause. A hearing where I can tell your council what honor is when you strip it of theater. Reed inclined his head a hair's breadth. You'll hate the room. I do not require love, Marok said. I require a room that remembers there are men in it. They exchanged the first packet then. Not the full lattice, not the bones, but a muscle, enough for Starfleet's best to see that what Tan had built was not a trick but a discipline. Reed took it without flinching at the weight of what it represented. Marok gave it without flinching at the betrayal of the oath he had once believed bound him to the men who had made the oath a joke. Outside, Tan exhaled for the first time in an hour. Mayweather looked down the corridor where no one stood and thought about what it meant to keep a promise to a man who might be your enemy tomorrow and your ally the day after. Time, Reed said. Time, Marok agreed. They separated like two currents splitting around a stone. Honor's strength bled heat again and then cinched her mask tight. Pioneer sank back into her own shadow. The D5S circled, confused by false corridors. The D6 buelled forward on rage and inertia. In the shuttle on the way back to Pioneer, Reed let himself feel the weight of what he had decided to carry. In the bay on the way back to the Raptor, Marok let himself remember Torvek's insubordinate, honest face and knew the young warrior would either die for him or try to kill him before this was done, and that both would be forms of loyalty. De Leon's whisper came in over the thin wire. Captain, you just stole a piece of the future. Borrowed, Reed said, which was a kind lie. We'll return it changed. Chapter 13. False Negotiations. Karatha's hail reached Pioneer the way contempt reaches a quiet room, first as pressure, then as noise. The D6's image did not paint on Reed's viewer. Karath didn't announce himself with a face. He announced himself with trajectory and weapons readied, coming in high and fast, vectored to cross the basin and bite down where Honor's strength had last exhaled. 2 escorts breaking wide, Thorne reported. D5 hull forms. They're setting a lid on the basin. Trip scrubbed a hand across his jaw. They mean to keep us out of the conversation. Or pretend there's a conversation at all, Reed said. Mr. Mayweather, hold our line. We are not a participant until I say we are. The subspace channel flashed, not an image, but text in Klingon Standard. Zhao read it as it arrived. To Honor's strength. From Imperial Command. Directive, submit for debrief. Failure to comply will be recorded as mutiny and resolved with final sanction. Mayweather let out the breath he had been holding. No negotiation. False negotiation, Trip corrected. They're gonna ask him to come home and then kill him for being late. Reed's voice was iron. Then we'll be where visibility ruins their plan. On Honor's strength, the message arrived like a stain. Morvatha's mouth tightened. Vecra bared her teeth in something that was not quite a smile. Tan did not look up from the lattice. It would not matter whether a liar's words were printed in fire or whispered in velvet. His coils still needed tending. Marok read the text himself. He did not laugh, he did not rage. He reached with one finger and erased it from the record so that if some future inquisitor demanded to know why there had been no reply, the ship could speak aloud the one truth worth reporting. We were already engaged. Cover stood at his shoulder. Orders. Set a course that makes obedience look possible, Marok said. A heading that could end beneath Karatha's gun if one were foolish enough to try to dock. Torvek's eyes lit with an ugly joy. And then we failed to comply, Marok said, and the bridge's quiet pleasure was the first warmth they had felt in hours. The basin became a trap the instant Karath believed it was a net. The D6 shouldered in, the D5S slipped to either side like wolves on the flanks, and the Raptor, small, hard, and very alive, eased into the throat of the station's shadow. Targets? Vecra asked. Only what breaks our way, Marok said. Tan, hold the mask at the edge of pain. Tan's answer was a thin thread of humor. I prefer it when the edge is at someone else's throat. He raised the lattice into a tight hum and used the rift's wall to scatter Karatha's forward sensors back at themselves. The D6 looked into the dark and saw its own reflection in 10 ugly poses. It fired at all of them. Now, Marok said, and Vecra put 3 clean lances through Karatha's dorsal targeting array. The big cruiser hiccuped, lost lock, and in that heartbeat Torvek slid them left into a seam only a helmsman who trusted his captain would try. D5 port is adjusting, Cover warned. Let him, Marok said. He'll choose between saving pride and saving Karatha's nose. On Pioneer, the story on the board became a language only 3 people spoke fluently. Reed saw the feint and the cut and the press. Mayweather saw where the cut would open because of the press. Tripp saw the music behind the motion, the way Marok had learned Reed's tempo and now invited him to play in the open. Captain, Thorne said, if we step in, we can peel the D5S off him. We step in and we become the thing Karath gets to shoot first, Reed said. His eyes didn't leave the screen. But if we do not step in at all, Karath gets to finish a story he can sell to his superiors. He looked to Mayweather and Tucker, the triangle that made impossible decisions survivable. We show our silhouette, Reed said. No weapons fire. Keep us where the first shot ruins a career. That may be the only shield we need. Pioneer slid sideways into a slice of space that made every Klingon helm officer reconsider his firing solution. The D5S hesitated, not from fear, but because they knew what a tribunal would do with logs that showed a Starfleet ship turned into wreckage inside a border basin that wasn't quite anyone's. Their hesitation was all Marok required. Chapter 14. The Meeting of Captains. They met again because they had to, not because either man loved the ritual. The second dead place had been chosen by calculus and patience, farther from the Narrows, nearer to the places where empires pretended not to eavesdrop. Reed boarded alone, because anything else would have turned conversation into theater. Marok arrived with Cover at his shoulder and dismissed him with a look that meant, "Be close enough to kill for me if this goes wrong." "You maneuvered with the care of a surgeon," Reed said by way of greeting. "Korath will live to complain." Marok's answer was a tilt of the head. "Men who complain are useful. They tell their masters things their masters do not wish to hear." Reed did not sit. "The window is closing. Your pursuers multiply. My superiors are anxious." "Anxiety is a kind of honesty," Marok said. "It admits fear." They spoke in the grammar of men who would duel if either drew too much blood with words. Reed asked for the bones of the lattice. Marok gave muscle and tendon and held back the marrow. Reed asked for the names of the men who had arranged the insult in the Chancellor's Hall. Marok gave the shape of the room and the smell of the wine, and refused the names because some truths buy you protection, and some buy you only the pleasure of hearing your enemy speak a name he had not expected you to know. "What do you think I want?" Reed asked finally, because there are times it is better to test your opponent's read of you than to improve your read of him. "To be able to tell your council you made a measured choice," Marok said without hesitation. "To keep your crew alive. To keep your Federation from tearing itself in half between men who think honor is policy and men who think policy is honor. And you. To leave my crew somewhere the ground does not move beneath their feet," Marok said. "To watch the High Council waste blood on trying to find me while I sit where they cannot reach without admitting what they are." A sound came through the dead station then, the groan old metal makes when a ship docks too hard. Both men looked up. Neither reached for a weapon. Both men lived because of that choice. Reed's earpiece clicked twice, a code so old from Enterprise days that he felt a small, disloyal pride at still using it. Mayweather's voice, soft, for signatures just dropped at long range. "Klingon. Not closing yet." Marok's nostrils flared, the only sign he'd heard Cover's identical whisper. "Your time is done here," he said. "So is mine." Reed nodded once. "Next place," he said. Marok nodded back. "Last place." They left like professionals, which is to say they left as if they had never been there. On the way back to Pioneer, Reed allowed himself one thought he did not plan to put in the report. "Of all the humans in the room, he chose me because he knows I will not lie to myself to make a better story." On the way back to the Raptor, Marok allowed himself one thought he would not say aloud to Cover. "Of all the humans at that helm, I chose Reed because he knows how to fight like a Klingon without sounding like one." The basin waited, and with it the final arithmetic of men who had run out of angles and would have to spend blood to buy time. Chapter 15. Torvek's Honor. The D6 returned shorn and furious, a hunting dog that had been made to chew nettles. It burned hard into the basin with 2 fresh D5s in company. The ECM lattice on Honor's strength was a violin string stretched too far. Tan tuned it anyway, hand steady, mouth grim. "Contact range in 90 seconds, Vecra said. "They intend to erase embarrassment." "Embarrassment breeds waste," Cover said. "We will profit by it." Reed watched from Pioneer's Bridge as if he had a hand pressed to the glass of a meeting room no one else could see into. "Shields cross-braced," Thorne said. "If we put ourselves between them and Marok, we can take 1 volley. Maybe 2. Then those are the volleys we will take," Reed said. "But not yet." Trip whispered, "Come on, Marok. Choose." Marok chose. "Tan," he said, "how long until the lattice tears if we hold the mask at full and maneuver as if we wish to live?" 30 counts, Tan said. He did not make it pretty. Marok nodded as if the number were a kindness. "Cover, begin evacuation to the coordinates we discussed." The bridge went still. Vecra's face broke first, rage and comprehension colliding. "We do not abandon our ship. We do not let them take her," Marok said. "We do not let our work be a banner on their wall. We put our bones where they choose their next step." Cover did not argue. He turned on his heel and began to move the crew with the kind of gentleness that looks like violence to people who have never evacuated a ship in enemy sight. Morvath went with the first wave, then Mara with the second. Tan stood fast. "You go," Marok told him. Tan shook his head. "My hands are the only ones that know how to keep the string from snapping before you are ready." Marok didn't waste breath on persuasion. "Then you leave when I say so, not when you think so." Torvek had not moved. He stared at the forward display as if it had told him a secret, and he was deciding whether it was an insult. "What becomes of the ship?" he asked at last. Marok met his eyes. "She dies with her teeth in someone's throat." Torvek's shoulders lowered, not in defeat, but into place, like a man who has finally found where to stand. The transporters worked like hymns whispered through clenched teeth. On Pioneer's pads, Klingon silhouettes resolved with the shimmer of stolen time. Bows and security moved them out with the speed of people who did not wish to argue with physics. "Last pattern lock from their bridge," Zhao reported. 2 signatures left aboard Honor's Strength. Reed's mouth tightened. Marok and Tan. "And one more," Trip said quietly, studying the faint returns. "Torvek." Mayweather flicked a glance up. "He's not leaving." "No," Trip said. "He's not." On the Raptor's bridge, Tan closed the last valves he would ever close on that ship. "Now," he said, the word a release and an order. "Go," Marok answered, and Tan obeyed. The transporter took him in a wash of air and relief. Torvek did not move. He stepped to the helm and laid both hands on the grips as if they were the handles of a blade he had finally been trusted to draw. He looked at his captain, and in his face Marok saw the realization that had taken an entire hunt to bloom. Obedience had never been the opposite of honor. It had been the road to it. "Today is a good day to die," Torvek said, and because he meant it without theater, the words became what the poets had always wanted them to be. Marok nodded once, something like pride burning in his chest where the old grief had lived. "Cut them," he said. Torvek drove Honor's Strength forward at a vector no sane helmsman would plot, through a thicket of green fire and into the D6's forward boom. The impact bloomed like a second sunrise inside the rift's ugly dawn. Metal screamed, the basin shook, the big cruiser's nose crumpled inward like a punched mouth. For a long breath there was only light. On Pioneer, no one cheered. Reed closed his eyes and opened them again. "Set course," he said, voice even. "Get us and them home." Chapter 16. The Longest Run. The run for Federation space was a study in exhaustion and mathematics. Pioneer redlined her engines without shouting about it. Field harmonics trimmed into the cleanest lines S.H. Wheeler's teams could manage. Behind them, the damaged D6 and 2D5S regrouped like men counting the teeth left in their mouths. "Range closing by meters per second," Thorne said. "They're angry enough to be patient." "Angry patience is the dangerous kind," Mayweather murmured. "Course laid to the line." Trip hovered over the board that watched subspace noise. "If they light everything they have for one sprint, they'll be in disruptor range 2 minutes before we touch blue." Reed didn't look at him. "Then we will hold 2 minutes longer than they expect." The edge of Federation space did not announce itself with a herald. It was a set of coordinates and a set of agreements, lines on maps and in minds. But when the 7 blue signatures flared ahead, even men who did not believe in omens felt their shoulders loosen. "Multiple Starfleet contacts dropping from high warp," Zhao reported. "Deadless refits, 5 hulls. 2 NX refits." The main viewer painted them in, industrial and proud, older designs made lethal by experience and necessity. They formed a wall without having to be told how. "Channel," Reed said. "Open." A gravel voice answered, a captain whose Andorian accent had been rubbed smooth by too many years among humans. "Pioneer, we've been waiting. You've brought friends." Reed allowed the smallest of smiles. "We'll pass through the middle. We'll leave you the rest." "Understood," the other captain said. "We'll discourage any visitors." Pioneer slid between the refits like a runner through a relay gate. Behind her, the D6 checked its speed, not from fear, but from the arithmetic of what it takes to start a war you are not yet prepared to finish. The D5S hung at the line, pacing, daring. No one crossed. In the observation lounge, Marok stood apart from his crew. Tan set a sealed data case gently on the table between them, then stepped back as if distance could keep the thing from exploding. Reed, Mayweather, and Trip entered together, the geometry that had carried them this far intact. "You'll be transferred to secure quarters until the council convenes," Reed said. "You are under my protection as far as that can stretch." Marok's mouth tilted. Protection is a fine word, but it is also a challenge. Reed met his eyes. "You wanted me because of honor among warriors. Let's see what the Federation Council thinks about our honor." On the far edge of the system, 3 red signatures lingered just outside sensory certainty. They did not cross. They watched. On Pioneer's Bridge, De Leon's whisper came in over a clean channel at last. "I've run first-pass decomposition on the muscle-tan scent. It sings, Malcolm. It's not a trick, it's a new language. If we learn it, we'll talk to space in a voice no one else has heard yet." Reed's answer was quiet. "Then we'll learn to use it responsibly or not at all." Trip did not contradict him aloud. He did not have to. "Some promises are prayers you make knowing you will fail them with care." "Take us in, Mr. Mayweather," Reed said. "Starbase 12. And Pioneer went home. Epilogue. Intelligence Files. Classified. Starfleet Intelligence/Section 31. Access Level Omega. Eyes Only. Stardate 1503.7. Author, Commander Charles Trip Tucker. Assignment, Field Operative, embedded aboard U.S.S. Pioneer. Subject, Operation Iron Veil, Debrief and Recommendations. Summary. Target Asset Marok, House Ram'yIS, and Engineer KTAN extracted alive into Federation custody following border pursuit by Klingon units, D6 Korath plus D5 escorts. I.K.S. honors strength destroyed in collision with D6 forward boom initiated by Torvek, Kia, enabling extraction and avoiding capture of ECM system. Data core secured, Ref, Annex A. Political fallout imminent. Recommend compartmentalized R&D under black budget. Public posture equals defensive countermeasures research. Assessment. Marok. Motivations present as honor restoration, read as controlled vengeance against High Council corruption. Capable of strategic restraint under fire, exploitable as a destabilizing narrative within Klingon hardliner circles. Handle with care. Loyalty is to concept of honor, not to Federation. KTAN. Primary technical source for ECM lattice methodology. Cooperative. Pragmatic. Security risk minimal relative to asset value. ECM, not a cloak. Pre-cloak sensor warfare discipline leveraging adaptive noise harmonics plus rift/environmental coupling. Replication feasible with time. Offensive applications likely. Maintain public deniability. Personal note. Reed remains Reed, conservative in motion, ruthless in math when it counts. Mayweather's intuition on Marok was early and accurate. 3 Klingon signatures shadowed us to the line and stopped. Felt less like pursuit and more like escort. If so, someone in high command wants Marok alive long enough to see which way we move him on the board. Recommendation. Accelerate analysis. Keep council briefings sanitized. Prepare for deniable counteractions if Klingon Shadow Watch turns kinetic. End file. Auto-purge T90S. Imperial Intelligence. High Council Dossier. Access. High Command only. Cycle 23, Year of the Batleth. Subject, Marok, son of Ram'yIS, Strategic Assessment and Interim Orders. Summary. Subject escaped border capture. Vessel destroyed. Survivors within Federation custody. Engineering asset KTAN believed to possess unique methodology for countersensor discipline. Federation response calibrated. Starfleet deployed refit wall at border to cover extraction. Public war risk considered unacceptable at present readiness. Assessment. Motive. Public posture, honor. Intelligence indicates personal vendetta catalyzed by lifemate's death and Council's refusal to punish responsible parties. Subject's defection risks internal narrative fracture among warrior cadres. Threat. High. If Federation reproduces lattice, Imperial sensor dominance along disputed sectors will erode. Countermeasures in development. Timeline inadequate for immediate parity. Political. Loss of Koroth's face, damaged, plus destruction of honor strength is humiliation. Open retaliation risks escalation. Shadow actions preferred. Directive. Maintain shadow watch along border. No crossing without deniable cover. Covert elements to locate subject within Federation protection. Terminate with plausible deniability if opportunity presents. Continue internal purges discreetly. Monitor houses sympathetic to subject's rhetoric. Seal of the High Council. End transmission.